And so the breathalyzers will be able to test your blood alcohol pretty well. We don't have anything like that except maybe for this swab, which I don't know that much about for marijuana. But that problem will continue whether Proposition 19 passes or not. That's a problem that law enforcement has now, and hopefully modern science will be able to help us out here.
I don't think legalizing marijuana will make more people drive high. I think plenty of people probably drive high already.
You know something? If anybody wants to get marijuana today, they can. My wonderful mother, literally a little old lady from Pasadena, it was a trauma in our family. My sister's daughter died of a malignant brain tumor at the age of 25, and my mother was so concerned that maybe Lori, her granddaughter, might come to her and say, "Betta, can you find me some medical marijuana?" And she didn't know where to go, and of course that chances of that were happening, I don't know. But she actually went to the Santa Anita racetrack, my mother did one time on opening day. She didn't like the races, but she was with a whole bunch of well-heeled people, and she happened to mention that. And she says before that day was over, 10 people came up to her and said, "Elizabeth, if you want to get medical marijuana, if you want to get marijuana, I know how I can get that to help you." So
great.
It's everywhere. And so let's recognize that fact. Yes, let's regulate it, control it, and it's a nice side benefit to be able to tax it too. It's not a reason to do it, but it's a lot better to have the money going to the city of Glendale or the city of San Francisco or wherever instead of juvenile gangs or the Mexican drug cartels.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that too. Do you think that if Proposition 19 is pushed through, that federal money could be withheld, as it says in the argument, for the schools? It says
technically, yes. Let's look at it this way. It was a violation of federal law in 1996 when the state of California passed Proposition 215 for medical marijuana. Now, fortunately, the Obama administration has recognized that and has stated through their Attorney General in a memorandum to all of the United States attorneys that as long as people are in compliance with local and state law with regard to medical marijuana, the federal government's going to leave them alone. And I think that's fully appropriate. And I'm absolutely convinced that they will do the same thing if and when we pass Proposition 19. You may be aware that Mr. Obama has a re-election in 2 years, and I cannot conceive that he will thumb his nose at the voters of California facing a new election. He's going to do the same thing. It's the concept of federalism. It's what our country was founded on. He acknowledged that with medical marijuana, and I'm fully convinced that they will do the same with regard to Prop 19.
Let's talk about LEAP.
Sure.
Tell me about the organization. How large is it? What are some of its great successes?
LEAP was founded maybe 8 or so years ago by former undercover police officers who were involved in narcotics. And they looked around too. In fact, one of them, Peter Christ, is on record as saying that during his professional career, he arrested thousands of people for narcotics violations, brought them in, convicted, all the rest of this. And he looks back and he says, you know, it didn't help anything. It probably ruined people's lives. So he gathered numbers of people in law enforcement together as a speaking group. And I am now a member and have been for several years. Most of them are retired. Why? I mean, I joined and was active while I was still a judge, but most of them are retired because, you know, it's easier to be able to tell the truth if you don't have to report to your police captain or the editorial board for the local newspaper or whatever. And so, yes, many of them are, but there are thousands now of members. And just to hammer that point home, there is one member, a guy named Joe McNamara, who is the former chief of police of San Jose in California and also Kansas City. And he now is at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. And he has caused, on 3 different occasions when I was there, he brought somewhere between 60 and 70 chiefs of police from around the country to Hoover Institute where we talked about this issue. And once the doors were closed and the cameras were off and the public was out, pretty much half of the chiefs of police spoke the same way that we do in LEAP. But they said, you know, we have a very political job, that I have to respond to the mayor, the city council, the editorial boards. I can't talk the truth because I need political cover. I need the voters to be able to allow me to tell the truth as I see it. And I wouldn't arrest your daughter if she were involved with drugs, and I wouldn't want you to arrest mine either. It's a problem for parents, and bring them there unless, of course, their actions are driving under the influence or they're hitting someone over the head with a pool cue or something like that. But otherwise, bringing them into the system is the wrong response. And they would go along with my comment here that yes, marijuana, for example, has its harms. No question about it. But the biggest harm, the biggest danger today with regard to marijuana is jail. And we are ruining people's lives. We are taking away their federal student loans, their federal eligibility for government housing, taking away their driver's licenses, all of these things because people in Washington, in Sacramento, realize that we can't fit this square peg into the round hole. What we're doing isn't working, so they take more radical measures to make this thing fit. And it just is time to call a halt and to take a different approach.
How does that affect these people who, the chief of police, the judges, who want to see this, your cause pushed through, but then they have to go by the letter of the law, correct?
Well, of course, and I did too. I took an oath to follow the law. It is still a violation of law in California to possess a hypodermic needle and syringe unless you have a doctor's prescription. And sir, if you have diabetes and you're shooting insulin or something, but it is illegal for medical doctors to prescribe a hypodermic needle and syringe to somebody that's using injectable illegal drugs. Okay, all of the studies show that needle exchange programs where anyone can exchange a dirty needle for a clean one, no questions are asked, no money changes hands, and by the way, the needles are only cost like 12 cents a piece, so that's not that much of a deal. But all the studies show that that does not increase drug usage. It doesn't decrease it either. It's pretty much neutral, but it decreases the incidence of AIDS and hepatitis and other bloodborne diseases by 50%. It's a crime to deprive somebody using injectable illegal drugs of a clean needle. Nevertheless, it's a violation of law, and I would have to enforce that law, and I did. I don't have to do it quietly, and that's why I'm talking to people like you.
Tell us how society would benefit from legalizing all drugs.
Well, I don't think I would legalize all drugs, at least not now. I would start with marijuana. I mean, what do I know? But let's start with marijuana. Let's find out. Let's recognize, though, too, that drug prohibition is the golden goose of terrorism. Pretty much every terrorist organization around the world gets its primary source of funding from the sale of illegal drugs. Fidel Castro has, Erich Honecker in East Germany, all of these people. We went to war against Manuel Noriega in Panama and took him out, and there's still drugs coming through Panama. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. So the drug money is something that we have to address. Nevertheless, let's start with marijuana. I said back in 1992 that I would have a government package store for heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. I probably still would, but the better way probably is to have a heroin-addicted people come closer to medical doctors, get a prescription for their heroin, have them injected under medically controlled circumstances. Their lives get so much better. They don't have to commit offenses to get their heroin because all of these drugs are dirt cheap. The only reason they're expensive is because they're illegal. So that's what they're doing in Switzerland today, and it's working quite well. We might try that as well, and then investigate and see.
Okay. I want to know something. There must be a huge infrastructure, and not illegal, legal infrastructure that has a vested interest in keeping all this illegal, from the Coast Guards down to the people who test in the lab, the urine. How much of a deterrent to this cause did they present?
Desiree, I was myself in the office of 2 sitting congressmen from Orange County, one by one. And each one of them actually brought up the subject because they knew my position with regard to the war on drugs. And basically they said, Jim, you're right. Most people in Washington realize that the war on drugs is not winnable, but it's eminently fundable. And people in Washington are addicted to the drug war funding. And it's not just the big guys that you would imagine, the Department of Justice, the Department of State, the military, the rest of that. But it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, it's the Bureau of Land Management, it's the Department of Agriculture. If you look in their budgets, each one has extra tens of millions of dollars earmarked in its budget each year to fight the war on drugs. And they don't want to give up the money. We're facing that problem. We're also facing problems with people who make money because of increased crime. I mean, who might that be? Obviously the Prison Guards Union. They're the strongest political lobby group in the state of California. Fortunately, to their credit, they have stayed neutral on Prop 19, which kind of surprised me, but good for them. But also people that sell security services, burglar alarm equipment, things like that. They make money because of increased crime. And you may not be aware, but the beer industry has donated like $10,000 to the No on Proposition 19 election. Why? Makes perfect sense from a merchandising standpoint. They don't want the extra competition.